Hello and welcome to another Building Clouds blog video demonstration. Today we're going to be talking about orchestrating the cloud. My name is Charles Joy. I'm a Senior Program Manager for the TED team. And the agenda for today? Well, more instructional demonstrations, but this time we're going to be covering three separate but related topics in what has become a series of orchestrating video demonstrations. So, we're going to be covering orchestrating the public, private, and hosted cloud provisioning via user role management. Then I'll talk through some orchestrating service templates, and then we'll wrap things up, and I'll show you how some of the infrastructure for this was built out in a brief runbook walkthrough for orchestrating private cloud lifecycle. The instructional demo components include System Center 2012 SP1 Orchestrator, Virtual Machine Manager, App Controller, Windows PowerShell, and a little bit of Windows Azure. So for the first set of demonstrations, we're going to be talking about public, private, and hosted cloud provisioning via user role management. Let's take a look at what the three demos will be. First demo will be provisioning private cloud resources via user role management. The second demo will be provisioning public and hosted cloud resources via user role management. And the third demo will be to automatically deprovision all cloud resources, private, public, and hosted, anything that was created after the user was provisioned the resources in the first place. So by now you've probably seen this video demonstration and blog post on the Building Clouds blog. So I won't obviously play that for you, but what I wanted to get across is that the demo that they show in there for the Cloud OS stack is what I'm going to be showing you today, but it's going to be the behind the scenes. It's the orchestrating part of it. It's the, well, what I would consider, because I have a strong bias towards orchestrator and automation, it's the, the guts of it. So without further ado, let's hop into the guts, I guess. All right, so here we are in the demo environment. This is VMM. We have Orchestrator open as well. And I have the Service Manager web portal, and we'll get into Azure a little bit later. I'll actually load that up in the background. All right, so why don't we get started? And the way we get started is by kicking off the demo. It's as simple as that. So I'm actually going to go to the Service Manager web portal and click through the demonstration and start it off. Now, I'm not walking you through the demo in any specific way. I need to kick it off so we can get the back end stuff moving. So next and submit. All the stuff in the back end is going to take place, and that's kind of the stuff that I'm going to walk you through. And the first demonstration is provisioning private cloud resources via user role management. So if we hop into VMM and we take a look at some of the clouds that we have here, let's take a look at the cloud that I'll likely get assigned to, SC Demo Cloud 001. We can see there's a VM in there, there's a service in there, but this stuff already exists. So I'm not provision this stuff on demand. Well, I could do that. We've discovered a better way. It's to provision users to user roles. In fact, there we go. I just got my link pop up that you may have seen in the demo. You can see there's the information. SR title, Building Clouds demo, customers, you, demo steps, and I obviously, if I was doing this for a customer and not a behind the scenes demo, I would go through these actions. You can see I did get Blog Engine 001. But you can see before that even popped up, this information and all these clouds and all these services already existed. So how do I get provisioned? How is this provisioning? Well, we're via user role management, which that's what the Orchestrator runbook is all about, that I'll show you in a second. That's what we do. We provision a user to that user role, which already has rights. So if I go ahead and go look at the service properties, access, user 001, now let's go check out user 001. There it is, properties, members, and there I am. Now, previous to this, I was not in here. I could prove that to you by going and showing you the second user that we have available, which should be empty, and it is. So, the provisioning of this cloud and these resources was done via user role management. So let's take a look at what that looked like in Orchestrator. So here are my set of runbooks, and this is the production system. I'm not fooling you, nothing up my sleeve here. If we take a look at cloud provisioning, we can see we have the runbook that was initiated, and this was initiated via Service Manager from the web portal via the Service Manager to Orchestrator integration that we have, and there's another video on that you've probably seen. If we look at the log history, this just executed. We can see it went through successfully. And here are all the steps. Now I'm not going to dive into each one of these steps, but let's take a deeper dive and look at this activity that's doing the work. That's the main point of this demonstration. All right, so we're setting up some variables here. We're gathering the user, and that's from the request, which happened to be me, as you saw that I was assigned. So then we get a list of roles. As you can see here, we have a wildcard search on something named user asterisk, and then we iterate through the list of roles, and we check to see if I already have one, which is not allowed. So obviously we fall out and we notify that you denied, you already have a cloud, and we say which cloud it is. You can see that here. But in normal cases, we don't know, the person coming in doesn't have a cloud, so we go ahead and give them a cloud that's related to that user. So user 0001 is related to SE Demo Cloud 0001. So it's as easy as that. And once this happens, then in VMM, as we saw earlier, you get added, and voila. So let's jump to the next demonstration. So the next demonstration is provision public and hosted cloud resources via user role management. So that's done actually via App Controller. Now we do have a VMM role here called hosted user 001, but that is leveraged via App Controller. So let's pop into App Controller. And you'll see I have options here because I've actually been assigned in App Controller 001 or 0001. Now I'm going to leave administrator because I want to show you some other stuff, but because I've been assigned a cloud and some resources in App Controller, I have the choice of choosing which role to enter as. So I'm entering as administrator. I'm going to see a whole bunch of stuff in here. We're going to see a lot of private clouds, a whole bunch of public clouds, and some hosted clouds. This would be narrowed down to my user role if I logged in with those the user roles that were identified in that login page. There we go. Hosted cloud, public cloud, private cloud. If we go to user roles, you notice user role 1, Redmond, CH Joy, that's me, and I've been assigned in scope the hosted cloud and the Azure. So let's go ahead and actually log out, and I'll log in as those roles, and you can see how it's been scoped down. So instead of administrator, user 001, user 001, and now we're going to see I have one private cloud that we looked at earlier, one public cloud, which I was assigned to via App Controller, and one hosted cloud, which I was assigned to via App Controller. Now, what does this give me? Well, if I wanted to deploy a new cloud, I can deploy to, any of those three. Services, I could deploy services to those three clouds. I could create virtual machines in those three clouds. So all of that has been done, again, on the back end with Orchestrator. So let's pop into Orchestrator and go to the location where that happened. So as you can see here, assign App Controller user role. This one is a PowerShell script, but I use the run program activity to execute an actual PowerShell script, and this is all variabled out. You can see I pass in password and AC assignment username. Let's go take a look at the actual PowerShell. All right, we're just going to navigate to where the script lives on the Orchestrator server, and we can see we have a series of App Controller scripts here, and assign user to first available role at the script. Now I have some parameters set up to take in, one of which is the App Controller URL that you need, what user role you want to have the authority to do this, and then we're passing in the assignment username, which would have been chjoy, and then we're executing this bit of PowerShell here. And just to walk through it quickly, we need to take in the password and secure it. We also need to import the App Controller module. We need to set the connection to the App Controller server, and then we need to get the roles. This is very similar to how we did the roles in VMM. You can see we're taking a look to see if you were assigned to something already. And then for each role, we go through. You can see the logic is consistent. And if you do not already have a cloud, you are then assigned scope via the user role. It's that simple. Now, if there was an App Controller integration pack, this PowerShell would have been put in there just like I did for VMM, but that's not available. So I created a PS1 file and I executed that PS1 file. So that's basically it for this demonstration on provisioning public and hosted cloud resources via user role management. Again, to recap, we use the PowerShell to put a user in a user role, and this is for App Controller. And in App Controller, you could see that user role would then get access to the public and hosted clouds because that's the scope that that user role has in App Controller. So let's move on to the next video demonstration. The next demonstration is automatically deprovision all cloud resources, private, public, and hosted. Well, I didn't create anything yet, so let's go ahead and quickly create something, at least in the public cloud. And I'm just going to deploy this app. All right, that is started. So we can see that the BCB demo prod for Azure has finished. Now, because I'm an administrator as well, I can go in and see that cloud. So you can see cloud service, and it is running, and it's all there. So I'm not going to mess around with that anymore. Let's also put this guy, the on-prem stuff, the private cloud stuff. See, it's release 2.5. Let's go ahead and service that. So we're just going to go ahead and upgrade this. We're going to leave it there. Upgrade. And you can see that it has finished servicing and it is now in release 2.6. So we've made a couple changes here. We have the private cloud stuff that's changed. We have an Azure service that's running. And I don't have anything really to do for the hosted cloud, but if I provision something, that would be deprovision as well. And I'll show you what I do for that in the runbooks. So we have this stuff that's just basically sitting here. I could demo and could do whatever I want with it. And then when my demo period is up for this, it would all be deprovisioned. And that's what this demonstration is all about, automatically deprovisioning all cloud resources, private, public, and hosted as necessary. Let's go end this demo and watch that stuff deprovision. So I'm going to refresh here. I'm going to go ahead and type complete. This updates the service quest, and then I have a runbook that watches that for the changes like that, and then we, essentially will get deprovisioned here in a matter of, well, it could take up to 5 minutes, so we'll see how long that takes. But I'll dive into what's actually going to happen in a moment. But this is where, see, get user comments. It's going to look for complete and then deprovision me. It's not going to be instant though. So let's dive into what actually happens during the deprovision process. So what we do, so during the deprovision process, so it doesn't get provisioned at the same time, is we put an account in there to hold it. And since we're looking for any available account that doesn't have me or something else in it, this basically holds the place until everything's cleaned up. So we assign our service accounts to it, We do that for both the VMM side of the house and the app controller side of the house. And the activities that do that are just PowerShell that happens here. So the removal of stuff is actually pretty simple. So one of the first things we do is for VMM, since it's at 2.6, we want to make sure it's at 2.5. That's just our process. We go ahead and service that template if it needs to be serviced. So if it's at 2.5, we don't touch it. If it's at 2.6, we go ahead and service that. So that gets initiated here in the deprovision process. And let me go dive into that. So service template reset, receive the cloud name, and then we execute this bit of PowerShell here that I'm not going to go too deep into, but what it does is it gets the information, verifies that the release is correct. If it's not correct, it basically resurfaces it, and we can see that it will set the service here, and then it'll set it back to the version that we need for a steady state. All right, we go back to that deprovision runbook. That's taken care of here. And then after a little while after that, we remove all Azure services using PowerShell. And then we remove all hosted services via PowerShell. And then when everything's said and done, we remove the service account from both the user roles so they can be reprovisioned. This is constantly being used, so we have to be sure that any of the clouds that are being provisioned aren't being over provisioned or multiple people put in one thing. So that's our method there. So that's basically it for this demonstration. Once that finishes, and in fact it's running right now as you can see, updating the service requests and all that. Once this finishes, everything that I've created in Azure and in the private cloud will be reset or destroyed, ready for reprovisioning for a new user. Now, let's see if we could pop in and catch that in App Controller. Oh, my user role. Yeah, see, I've been deprovisioned, but since I have admin, it sort of still recognizes me. So I'm going to sign out, and I'll sign back in. User roles. Click on one. We can see that service account is in there as a placeholder, but my account is out. And if we go to VMM, settings, user role, members, we have that service account in there as a placeholder, but I've been deprovisioned. So if I wanted to go get a new cloud, I can go do that now because I wouldn't be associated with it, but I wouldn't be able to get this cloud because it's currently being, worked on. Now, as far as the artifacts, let's check out to see if it's not been deleted yet, but it will be. And then in VMM, if we go to that cloud, we can see that it is back to 2.5. So that bit has been done. Where it's currently, if we check on the runbook, it's been completed as well. So we're just waiting for the targets to catch up with the commands that have been executed across them. So nothing had changed in the hosted, but I'm hoping that we can see the changes reflect. Yeah, good. So I was just a little lag there, but cloud service is gone. That was deleted by this activity here. It's just a PowerShell script that I could go ahead and show you. Okay, so you can hear we import the Azure. I'm using PowerShell for the Azure stuff, and we're basically taking the necessary steps to remove any services or disks or VMs or anything that had been published to Azure. So it's a standard removal script for PowerShell and Azure. But you saw the results. There is nothing in Azure for that role, or period, since no one's actively been provisioned or has provisioned anything to Azure for this. In App Controller, let's verify that that placeholder has been removed, and it has. And we go to VMM, we can verify that the placeholder has been removed here. There we go. So this ends the demonstration for automatically deprovisioning all cloud resources, private, public, and hosted. Now, we didn't see the hosted stuff, but it would work exactly the same based on the runbook that I've shown you. Now, let's go into the next section of demonstrations, which is all about orchestrating service templates. Let's take a look at what the demonstrations will be for that. Automated removal of a service template deployed service, automated deployment of a service template into a service, and automated servicing of a service template deployed service. So this demo is all about removing cloud services. As you can see here, I have a bunch of cloud services, each in their own cloud. I could have had multiple cloud services. You can see some are in a bad state, some are in a good state. So what I'm going to do is actually remove one of them just to show you the process, and then I'm going to actually batch a bunch of removals, and I'll show you how I'm doing that. So to do that, let's go into Orchestrator. So this is my ad hoc maintenance runbook I have for provisioning and deprovisioning services, and I use the same one. I just swap out what I'm enabling. Obviously, if this was something I used a lot, I would have, parameterized it a little bit better and, made it more automated. But I don't do this very often, so it's easy enough for me to disable the provisioning stuff and enable the deprovisioning stuff, or vice versa. So I'm going to disable the stuff here. And again, this is just my process for our production service. You would obviously have probably a CMDB or a database where you would store the information for the cloud deployment, and then you would trigger a runbook very similar to what I'm doing here. So part of this is likely what you might do, but exact thing how I'm doing it here probably isn't. But you should get the point here. So I'm just going to enable what I want here. I'm going to pop into here. This is that text file that I talked about earlier that has the information about the cloud names, the VM names, and things, and service names and stuff like that. So we want to try just one. So this is literally reading line number 1, which deals with cloud number 1, which will pull the service and then we'll remove it. And then I'll do multiples after that. So I'm going to hit finish. I'm going to make sure that's passing the information in. So the line text, which will read line number 1, which has service 1's information in it. I'm going to go ahead and check this in. I'm going to run it, and then we're going to see that for Cloud 1, this will get removed here in a matter of seconds. There it is, stopping, stop, deleting, and removed. So if we go into Orchestrator, see what actually happened, then I'll kick off the batch. So this runbook here is kicking off sub runbooks 1.2 Virtual Machine Manager 1.2.5. So sub runbooks Virtual Machine Manager 1.2.5. So very simple. It's just a PowerShell script using the PowerShell integration pack activity that comes with Virtual Machine Manager. And we're basically pulling in the cloud using the git sc cloud command for PowerShell and VMM. So we identify the cloud. We then identify the cloud service based on the cloud. Obviously, if we had more than one, then we would deal with that iteratively. And then we remove it. Pretty simple. Then I output data just because the integration pack requires a variable. Now, I don't know if I have logging turned on. If I do, you could see, I do, you could see what was removed, log engine 001. Now, as a final part of this demonstration, I'm going to go ahead and get rid of a whole bunch of them, ones that we need to actually remove and redeploy, which I'll do for this demonstration as well. So I'm just going to go get that list and we'll be back. Alright, so I have my list. I have 13 more that I need to get rid of. So I'm going to just paste those in there. Again, this is reading from a text file. These could be records in a database or CMDB items. I'm just querying that text file for information, passing that data through. So I'm going to go ahead and check this in. You're going to see, and I'll go back into the runbook real quick as it's running. You'll see here, we've got a bunch running at one time. I've set parallel executions, job concurrency here to 5, so it will crank through 5 at a time for the 13. So I usually 2 batches of 5 and then some stragglers. So all of these have been removed, and we go into VMM, go into jobs, and we can see that it's removing them as predicted, and everything looks good. So that's about it for this demonstration, automatic removal of a service. You could just run the PowerShell, but this is baked into the rest of the runbooks that I have for the solution, and I could just call this runbook, and I can initiate it from anywhere. It could be Service Manager, it could be just like I did here, it could be from some other process. It could be based on an alert or something. If something went wrong and we just need to, basically redo that service, it could automatically remove it and then redeploy it. We're going to get to redeployment in the very next demonstration, which I'll start now. Alright, so this demonstration is all about automated deployment of a service template into a service. And as you remember the last demonstration, if you watched that one, I deleted a bunch of services or removed them from the clouds they were associated with. As an example, here's one, SCDemo Cloud 001, that does not have VMs or services. We're going to remedy that by actually deploying a service which has a VM associated with it automatically via Orchestrator. So let's pop over to Orchestrator. We're going to use this same runbook, so I'm just going to check it out. I'm going to swap it, and I'm going to enable the deployment stuff and disable the removal stuff. And again, this is just our process. Yours would vary. Obviously, you would have stuff that would read from a CMDB or a database or some sort of other data source than a text file likely. And then your process may include the runbook, similar to mine, which will deploy a cloud service. But this other stuff that I have in here are notifications, which you may or may not use. And then, of course, if you remember from the previous 2 or 3 demonstrations ago in this video, we add a placeholder user role so it doesn't get assigned during maintenance. So and each of the ones that I previously removed from a previous process have this placeholder in here. So we want to make sure we remove that so these are live and ready to be used but in our production environment. So I'm going to go ahead and make sure this has the services that we want to add. Back to VMM, I'm going to hit finish, and I'm going to check this in. And unlike the removal, which ran 5 at a time in a batch, this actually runs 1 at a time. So this is going to take a while. So we're not going to see the end of this demonstration. We're going to see the beginning and the kickoff and stuff like that, at least the first deployment. And that is strictly my choice. I do that so I can wait on the service deployment so I can actually know when it's finished that it either failed or was successful, and I can remove that user. If I did it in everything, because everything's asynchronous, otherwise it would just go through, and then I'd have to query in a different way. So it's just easier. It's a long running process, not a big deal. That's again our process. Yours will vary. So we're going to kick this off now. By the end, in several hours, all of this will be finished. Each one of these will be deployed. I'll either get success or failure emails based on each one, and then they'll all be ready. But we'll kick this off now and take a look at what the runbook is doing. Alright, we can see here it is kicked off the first one, so let's dive into what that looks like, which is 1.26 in Virtual Machine Manager. Same folder as before, but one tab over. Alright, so I could have set these to run concurrently, but as I said, we're waiting for completion so we could see success or failure for the whole runbook. Now, what is this doing? Well, it's taking information in, which is the cloud name, and for the first one it's likely 1. Let's take a look. Yep, 1. And is deploying a service. So let's take a look at that. So this PowerShell, I'm not going to go too much in depth here because it's quite a bit, but we're gathering a whole bunch of information, then essentially using what we decided for all the configuration and everything, including passing in information to a service template into this PowerShell and essentially deploying a service. That's what the end state for all of this is. That's not too critical. This is a very high overview of all this stuff. So right now, just know that this object deploys a new service asynchronously, and then because it's asynchronous, if we refresh, we should see that it's currently in the get service deployment status, which basically gives us information on the deployment state of that service. So here we are. It's basically going to query this at a looped interval, which I'll check right now. Every 300 seconds or 5 minutes, it's going to check that it meets all this criteria. If it doesn't meet this criteria, it loops. When it does, it'll exit. So I do have timeouts on that, so it doesn't, in case something's wrong, it doesn't take forever or infinite loop. And then, of course, we're going to add the user role back to the service deployment, making sure that user 001 is attached to that service that we're deploying. And then, as a part of our process, we're going to check the actual blog engine URL, the URL resulting from the service that's created, to make sure it's good to go, and then return success. If any of these things fail, well, other than this one, because that usually never fails, we will return a failure. If it's successful, we'll return success and move on to the next one. Well, it'll move on either way, but at the end, I'll get a report of failures and successes. And every time I've done this in the past, I get all successes, which is good news. So let's hop into VMM and see what's going on. And it's pretty self-explanatory, but it's in its process of deploying this service, and I did nothing other than kick a runbook off. So essentially that's it for the automated deployment of a service template into a service. Now I didn't do, and I'll jump into that now, what is it using? Well, if we go to our library, service templates, it's actually leveraging this service template, which was part of the PowerShell that I had showed you earlier. This other template here is for the servicing part, and I'll get to that demonstration in a little bit. But this is the service template that's being deployed, and of course if we check out the service deployment configuration template area, we can see that blog engine 001 is currently being deployed based on the configuration that we sent it. So all of that is being taken care of automatically, and like I said, our service template actually takes in parameters, and we have all that PowerShell set up to pass in that information, like virtual machine name and all that. So we should see, actually, well, you can see it there too, but there's a VM. We've named it based on the name of the service, and well, everything is working so far. So it's just a waiting game now. So once this is finished, it'll move on to the next one, and the next one, and the next one. So that's quite a bit of work for VMM to do and Orchestrator, but it's automated, so I just have to wait for the emails to come in later today. So we're going to jump to the servicing demonstration right now. All right, this demo is all about automated servicing of a service template deployed to service. Well, we've shown removal, we've shown deployment, and now we're going to show servicing. In fact, we showed servicing earlier on in section 1 of this very long video demonstration. So I didn't go into it, but we're going to show it now. And you can see we're still deploying all that stuff that we deployed earlier. In fact, which one are we on now? 6 of the however many we're doing. You can see 3 are already done, so we're just cranking through that. And if we go into VMM, we can see, well, there's 6. I must have checked on it recently. Number 1 is finished, 3 is finished, 4 is finished. So we're good to go there, and 6 will, continue to deploy, and so will the rest of them that are in the queue. So servicing, though, we have a runbook over here that we use for servicing or resetting the service if it is in a state that we don't like. For giving someone the cloud, we want it to be in version 2.5. That's our process. And if it's in 2.6, we want to service it back. So I have a runbook that resets it if necessary. So let's take a look at the runbook, and then we'll actually run it through the runbook tester so you can see it working. So take a look here. So you can see we gather some information. What is the deployment state and the deployment release? And then we use that information to make sure if it is the new release, then we actually surface it back down to 2.5. That's in our case. And you can see I use the parameters as variables, so I store that information. We could change that any time if we needed to. So if it matches 2.6, which is the newer version, the quote-unquote broken version that we have for the demonstration, then we will set it back to 2.5, and that's what this PowerShell does. So we're going to have to manually service it to 2.6 so we can actually set it back to 2.5 with this runbook. So let's go ahead and use App Controller. And it'll log me in as administrator, and you'll see all the stuff that I can administer. But we actually want to go to services, and I want to grab 48, something that's not going to get allocated during this demonstration. Oh, there it is, 48. And I want to service it. And again, this is the manual. I could create PowerShell to do this, but our process is to service it back down. So it really, whatever your process is, you could build PowerShell around that. So I'm going to go ahead and upgrade it. It's very simple in App Controller to service something. I'm going to pick 2.6, and then that's it. We're going to upgrade. Now it's going to sit here and service this once I hit OK. And then that is a particular version of that Blog Engine app that, for the demonstration, if you've seen the demonstration, it breaks the app, and we would want it back into the known good working version, which is 2.5. That's the whole reason we're doing this, and we hand out these clouds and these services in the known good state, obviously. So I'm going to come back when this is finished. Alright, it looks like it just finished up there. So you can see the release is at 2.6. We're in OK status. And, well, that's the state we wanted to do for the testing. So let's go back to Orchestrator. We're going to go ahead and do the runbook tester for this. So I'm going to step through. Cloud name, SC Demo Cloud 0048. OK. Then it's going to execute that PowerShell, which will check to see what the state is, and then if it's 2.6, it'll revert it to 2.5 or surface it to 2.5. So it's running now. We can go into VMM and take a look. You can see it's pending servicing, and it's currently servicing. Obviously, that was all done via the runbook that I'm using for the testing mode. So we're going to come back when that's finished. Alright, looks like it just finished. So we're back down to 2.5. Everything's okay. So we'll go back to the runbook because it has some more things to do. And we just do a quick check to make sure the blog engine URL is good to go. And then obviously it'll either go down the fail path or the succeed path. Likely the success path. You can see it is in release 2.5. It's deployed and it was successful. So if we ran through this again, we would see that it skips over the servicing because it's not necessary. So I'll show you that that's the logic I built in. And I could do this for any of the ones that are in a 2.5 version. So there, next. It's going to do its quick check. There we go. And it's going to check the URL again. Obviously it's good. And it'll go down the success path. There we go. It's still in 2.5. Obviously nothing changed it. So that's my process, or our process, for resetting the private cloud app that we have there. Because really there's only two states for it in our demonstration. It's either 2.5 or 2.6. So if it's 2.5, we move on. We test it, make sure it's good. If it's 2.6, we service it back down to 2.5 and then test it, and we move on. So that's our process. And that's it for our automated servicing of a service template deployed service. I don't know how many more times I could say service in that. So I guess that's it. Let's see if 6 is done. It looks like it's running. It's completed. So it's on to the next one. So okay. So that wraps it up for orchestrating service templates. We're going to move on to the next section now. And now for the last section of demonstrations, we're going to be talking about orchestrating the private cloud lifecycle. This is basically a couple runbook run-throughs of how we got the infrastructure set up in the first place via Orchestrator and PowerShell. The first demonstration will be automated deployment of clouds, services, and virtual machines. And the second demonstration will be automated deprovision of clouds, services, and virtual machines. All right. This demonstration is all about automated deployment of clouds, services, and virtual machines. Well, you already saw services and virtual machines, and I'll go through that a little later. But it's really about the clouds and the infrastructure, and even the user roles for our infrastructure. So you can see here we have 50 clouds, well 51, but 50 numbered clouds, and those have associated services with them. But how do we get all this stuff in there? Do we manually create all those? Well, not on my watch. So we'll go into settings here. You could see user roles. We have a whole bunch of user roles in here, all the way to 50. So manually creating those would have been very tiresome. And of course, you could crank out the PowerShell and do that. But I have runbooks set up that actually orchestrate the PowerShell necessary for this, and I've hooked them to those text files I've been using. So let's take a look. So in my setup runbooks section here, I have populate VMM user roles, populate VMM clouds, and then populate VMM associate those user roles with those clouds. Now we used to have 100 clouds in here, but we tiered it back because we didn't need that kind of capacity. So I'm just going to actually leverage the text file, which if this is the first time you've probably seen it, and I've shown it, but we've been leveraging these text files, which just have a cloud name in them or usernames depending on what you're looking for. But these go all the way to 100, and it's line 1 is SC Demo Cloud 001, so on and so forth. Same thing with user roles. See user role all the way to 100, and then user roles I put up just a comma delimited list. Well, not much of a list, but there's the comma delimited list for user and cloud number. So we're going to actually use that file, and I'm going to create a couple just for this demonstration, then we'll delete them. So let's go ahead and modify that text file, what lines we want to read. I'm going to do 51 through 53. I'm just going to do a couple of them. And we're going to run them in this order. We're going to create the user role, we're going to create the clouds, and then we're going to associate the two. So we're good to go here, 51 through 53. I'm going to check it in. I'm going to run it. And what it's using here is the create user role and update user role property activities that are available in the Virtual Machine Manager SP1 integration pack. Configuration is pretty easy. Profile type I've selected from the pick list, and then what user role am I creating? That's coming from the text file. And then the update user role property, I'm adding a property, and it happens to be actions, which the value, which I had to figure out through PowerShell, is create from VHD or template, and I'll show you the scope once they're created. Looks like they've completed. Yep. So let's go into VMM, settings. If we scroll down, there's 51, 52, and 53. So let's investigate what kind of scope it has. Members, nobody, because that's where we add and remove people. Scope, we haven't associated them with the cloud yet. In fact, the cloud that we want doesn't exist yet, so we'll get to that. Resources, networking, actions is what we're looking for. Deploy, and to get those checkboxes checked automatically, that's the configuration in that last activity I was showing you. All right, well, let's do the next bit, which is the cloud creation. I'm going to go ahead, put in 51 through 53. And again, it's going to read from that text file, getting the information from there. In your case, you'd likely be pulling from a CMDB or a database or something like that, but likely not manually creating these things. I'm going to check it in, run it, and we're going to create some clouds. Now, what are we doing there? Well, there's no activity for creating clouds, but I have PowerShell, which is pretty simple. Well, it's based on the PowerShell that's available when you hit View Script after you've gone through the wizard. So this is specific for us. You can see some GUIDs in there, and I would have to update those if we recreated this entire environment. But since this hasn't been recreated, this should just work. And really the only information that we're getting dynamically is the cloud name. The rest of the stuff is based on what is the capability profile and quotas and stuff like that. So it's looks like that is finished. All three of those. Let's go look in VMM. Go back to the clouds, and there they are, 51, 52, and 53. So let's go look at the configuration that was automatically deployed based on the PowerShell that we used. resources. The capacity we could have changed. Capability profile, you saw that was Hyper-V. And that's it. So you could, obviously yours will vary based on your specific need for the creation of clouds. Again, they haven't been assigned to a user or anything yet, and that's what we're going to do now. Let's go back to Orchestrator, this last runbook here. Check it out. Change this to 51 to 53. I had zeros in there, so in case someone ran it, it wouldn't actually do something. That was just my failsafe. Now I'll have to go back and change that after we're done here. But 51 through 53 is what we want. Check in. And I'm going to run it. And what is this doing? Well, it's going to read the information. We're going to use the update user role activity that's available in VMM to read in the role name and the cloud name and associate the two. So this will be done in a matter of seconds, and we'll take a look at that when it's finished. Alright, looks like it's good. 3 cloud associations, so let's go back into VMM. Alright, easiest place to look at this is actually in the user. So if we go to scope, we scroll down, we'll find a checkbox. There it is, 51 is for user 51. You might guess that 53 is associated with 53. Alright, there we go. So we have 3 new clouds, 3 new user roles, and they're associated. Now we could use that runbook that I used in the previous demonstration to deploy services to these clouds, and that's as simple as going back to Orchestrator, going back to my ad hoc, and then I'm not going to do it because you've already seen it, but changing these numbers to 51 through 53, hit finish, and then it'll go through the deployment of each of those for those clouds. But because we're not actually going to use these, and the next demonstration is to destroy the stuff that I created, I'm going to go ahead and stop it here and then move on to the deprovisioning of the stuff that I just created. Alright, time for our last demonstration, which is all about automated deprovision of cloud services and virtual machines. And once again, we saw the services and virtual machines deprovisioning in a previous demonstration, but I'll hop into that runbook right now so you can see it again. Again, it's just executing the service removal, which will get rid of the virtual machine as well. And if we remember, it was very simple. Remove cloud service, just a bit of PowerShell. What's the name of the cloud? It gets the service, removes the service, everything's gone. So that's where we're sort of taking from. Like once all the services are gone, now we could remove the clouds and the user roles that are associated. So let's go back into Virtual Machine Manager. We can see here 51, 52, and 53. We just created those if you watch the previous demonstration. And we actually didn't add any services. But if we did, we would have removed them via that runbook that I just showed you. And you can see we have other ones that have them in there. And I don't want to disturb any of that stuff since we reprovisioned a lot of that stuff in the previous demonstration, previous to even the one you just saw. So lots of demonstrations here. So 51, 52, 53. If you remember, we have the user roles that are scoped down to those. 51, 52, and 53. So I've been using orchestrating PowerShell for all of these demonstrations. I thought I'd jump in as a little treat to show you just PowerShell, since PowerShell is a first-class citizen, in my opinion. And well, why wrap it in Orchestrator if you don't have to? If it's up to you. This is certainly one way to do it, and it might be faster or not. The things that you don't get with PowerShell are that database backend logging for audits and stuff like that, and audits when you run them. So, and you can't really, I mean, you could feed it from other things, and this you don't need to because I just put a range in here and then do for each. So it's up to you. But I wanted to show you the PowerShell and just executing the PowerShell for this specific thing. And we're just going to clear the previous runs here so we have fresh logs so you can see what's going on. And basically we're going to import the Virtual Machine Manager module. We're going to set up an array. We're going to populate that array with specific names, in this case user, and then 00, 51, 52, 53. We need to modify this. You can tell the last time I used this was to destroy 51 through 100, so we just want 51 through 53. Then we're going to iterate through that array, getting the user, and then piping it to the remove, and be done with it. So I'm going to go ahead and save that, run it, and then we'll see that those user roles, boom, are removed. If we go into VMM, they're already gone. So, I mean, obviously that looks faster, but I had to open up the PowerShell, I had to modify it. With Orchestrator, I could just modify you tweak it a little bit and execute that same PowerShell. It's completely up to you. I use both methods. So back into PowerShell, just like we had for user role, we have for cloud. So modify this again, 51 to 53 for our demonstration. Save it, run it, and it's done. So if we go and take a look at VMM and go to the VM and services area, look at the clouds, 51, 52, and 53 are gone, as are the users that were associated with them. Obviously the association is gone since both of the objects no longer exist, and that's that. So it can be as easy as running some PowerShell scripts. It depends on your needs. It depends on how you want to initiate them. If you want to wrap some service management around this, Orchestrator is definitely the best place to go, because then you could trigger it from the web service portal. But that's it. We've now removed or deprovisioned the clouds and user roles, and we have previous evidence that we can remove services and virtual machines. So it can be all PowerShell or Orchestrator. It's your choice. So until next time, happy automating. Well, that's it. I hope you enjoyed this Orchestrating the Cloud demonstration video. If you want more information, please visit us at http://aka.ms/buildingclouds. Also, please follow us on Twitter at building_clouds. I appreciate you watching. Thank you.